All right, guys, how you doing? It's Rabea. Hope you're all well. I'm sat here with this guy.
Hello.
This is Mark Roberts. Hi, Mark.
Hello.
Mark has a YouTube channel, although refers to it as his YouTube station, which is true.
Yeah.
And he is a really awesome, prolific mixing engineer, recording engineer, drummer, guitarist extraordinaire. That was responsible for the epic sounding Fire by the Silos record by Toska. So if you've seen the making of...
How do you respond to that sort of thing? I don't know.
Stop
it.
Yeah, if you've seen that documentary, then obviously you'll see Mark working on it, doing everything. So the reason that we're doing a video today is A, to let you know that Mark's started a YouTube channel and he's going to be doing all sorts of mixed tutorials and general...
Just shamelessly plugging my YouTube channel.
Yeah. And secondly, we've had lots of questions on my sort of YouTube community page. I asked you guys if you wanted to know anything about the recording process. So this is like a Q&A. This is not an Ask the Fro. This is a Ask the Bros.
The bros.
Ask Mark.
We should have thought of something snappy before we did this, really.
Maybe
Maybe it's better just, there we go.
It's ad-lib it. It's improv, you know.
Yeah.
All right, well, I've got my phone, as professional as I am, and I've got all these questions, and I'm going to go through them.
Yeah.
And we'll pick out questions, and then we'll answer them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
How is Flatulence treated in a studio setting? Asks Surf the Japstrap.
With disdain, sometimes. Depends. Some bands come in and because they're so comfortable with each other already, they've just got like a kind of thing going on where it's fine to do that.
I think now, so like in our situation, if we were in the studio with you, I'd feel more comfortable about it now than I would have done when we did the album.
Yeah.
Because we were like, we knew each other, it was a little less. You know,
I think you have to ease into it. If you come in and start doing that straight away, it's going to colour your view of someone.
Yeah, it is. And often you can do it as a joke. Like if Ben's tracking drums and it's quite a serious situation, I can go in with the camera. He'd be like, Ben, I'm going to film you. Do you mind? And then as I get close in, I can drop one and allow him to deal with that.
Yeah.
Mid-take. I don't know. I think it's just a thing that happens. It's a perfectly natural bodily function.
Yeah, and it's whether you want it on your record or not as well. Because
that air will pass through the mic.
Yeah, we could be talking about the control room, or we could be talking about the live room. So,
do you know? I feel like it's worse to do it in the control room.
Definitely, it depends on.
It's always warm in there.
The size of the control room and the airflow.
Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Mistakes have been made.
Mistakes have been made
by me and others.
Okay. That was Surf the Japstrap. I hope that answers your question. It's kind of a...
We could do a more in-depth video on that later on, maybe.
Yes, we could.
Maybe.
If you want to see a video more about Flatulence in the recording space, then please comment down below. Next question is from Brenton Rakebrat Z. And he says, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to talk at this camera. Correct me if I'm wrong. Congress was recorded separate to the rest of the album? ? How did you go about getting a consistent mix with Congress in comparison to the rest of the album? It's a great question.
Yeah. I mean, we had this discussion before, didn't we? Because I think this was something everyone was a bit concerned about. And my attitude was just to sort of essentially not worry about that, because I thought it's the same people, it's the same studio, I'm going to be mixing it. I think you can get really caught up in trying to make... I don't know, people get too hung up on consistency, I think, and you need to, I don't know, with this album, I think we tried to treat every track in its own merit. So, you know, some tracks are baritone guitar, some tracks aren't. Things like that make just as much of a difference. We used a different drum kit on the other songs, I think. Yeah,
we did. We had the Q drums for Congress, didn't we? Mm-hmm. And then we used the Guru's one on the rest. Yeah,
and I think as long as they sound good, it's not gonna. Those sort of things are varying slightly, but I think there's just as much variation, song to song, through other factors like using a different guitar amp, or you know, the song itself being different as well.
I think because I mean the kind of small backstory with that was originally when we did the first EP, Dave and I went in and did it, and we were getting geared up to do second record, and that was the plan to do the same thing. It was me and Dave were going to go in and we were going to, give it our all. And I had a change of heart, which, because I heard the Black Peaks record, Statues, which Mark mixed and engineered and did that all, and I heard that and I was like, that's a great sounding record. But also it was the idea of, because I'm a huge fan of Carnival, and that was my quickest example, was when Forrester Saville came in to do their records, like Sound Awake and stuff. There was this ongoing relationship between band and producer, like an extra member of the band,
right?
That they all kind of worked together to create something that you wouldn't be able to do just as a band. You know what I mean? Like, you needed that outside opinion. And I was really, really intrigued and excited about the prospect of having someone come in and go, have you thought about not having a sound like that on the guitar? Or have you thought about changing that drum fill? Or have you thought about it being this kind of sounding record? And that, and then I met you at a bar at a Black Peaks gig. I think it was a Green Door store in Brighton.
I think it was at the Small Ponds.
Oh yeah.
Thing all day.
Yeah, and
Bad Pond.
And because we played that.
Yeah.
And you were like, I'd love to come and talk about mixing the record, and that was the reason. I was like, this needs to happen. Told Dave, and we decided that we would relinquish control. And I think for the best reasons, and it's come out. I couldn't be happier with the sound of the record.
Yeah.
So.
I think we initially met, and then that was when I mixed the Dorje thing,
including Dorje. I completely forgot about that.
The
Centered and
Centered
One
and
was
One.
mixed by Mark.
Yeah, and that, it was good. I mean, that's what a good, in my opinion, that's what a good producer should do. It's it should be a collaboration, unless that's not what the band wants. Like, some bands really want someone to totally mix things up, but hopefully what I brought to the table is kind of helping you realise your vision rather than...
Absolutely.
Yeah, there would have been a few suggestions of try this, try that, but I think a lot of the time it's like, just getting on the same wavelength as the band and trying to help them.
I think it helps that you are a drummer as well, and that, because the thing I loved the most, and the first thing I thought when I heard of Statues was the drums sound fantastic. And for me, it's one of the most important elements of a record is the drum recording.
Yeah.
And I loved the live feel of it and the very raw, like that's just a drum kit being smashed in a room.
Yeah.
But it sounds controlled at the same time. So, so I don't know what the original question was. I think it was about...
It was about Congress,
Yeah, it was.
It?
Yeah.
Went off on a tangent, but a very, very interesting tangent.
Yeah. And so that, so back to my original point was that we decided that if we were going to do that, we would see if Mark wanted to come and do a track, and then we would see how we worked together in the studio, how the final mix came out, like how the whole relationship unfolds in the studio. So
and to be fair, every time I saw you, I was like, so you're doing a new EP soon? Sort of thing.
yeah. And then, so we got in the studio, we did Congress, which you saw, there's a little making of that as well. And then when we came away from, we were meant to release it as a single, but we came away from it and we were like, we were so happy with the result that we thought, rather than release it prematurely, let's just get in, do the rest of the album. So I remember giving you a comment like, let's just do it.
And interesting, like, I think that was a learning curve in terms of us getting to know each other and finding a working method, but also, I mean, that was mixed and mastered and everything ready to go because of Plan A. And then when it came to doing the rest of the album, I remixed that one, having done some of the other stuff, and I'm glad it worked out like that, because I think the second mix was much better, and
I mean, it all sounds good to me, but
it was better, wasn't it? It was definitely because I get to know your taste as well, because you do a few recalls and stuff, and you've heard a track so many times, and then it can be beneficial to come back sometimes, because it was probably 4 or 5 month gap, and then come back to it and you're like, it's really obvious what needs to change, I guess. So it was quite easy doing a remix of that, I think, and hopefully benefited from it as well.
Great question. Right. This is quite a big question. This is from Low Budget Guitar Playing.
Cool.
And he says, do you focus on EQing the crossover of the bass guitar and drums to a specific frequency to get that full band in unison sound? How many guitar tracks are there at different... I think this is multiple questions.
Yeah.
The next chunk is, how many guitar tracks are there at different points? Are there any sections single tracked or quad tracked for heaviness? How did the process differ from recording Dorje and Toska on a smaller scale without a producer? What did you all learn from your time in the studio? So that's quite a big...
Yeah.
I think we answered some of that in the previous question. So the one I want to focus on are the first two bits, which is, do you focus on EQing the crossover of the bass guitar and drums to a specific frequency to get the full band in unison sound? We'll start there.
No. I don't think I do anyway. Not in that kind of scientific way. I don't think there's a specific frequency or anything like that. You do obviously have to think about the relationship, and I think Dave and I kind of put our heads together because Dave had quite a specific idea of how he wanted the bass to sit, and especially in relation to it was more in relation to the guitar, wasn't it? It was kind of, I think a lot of it he wanted to, sorry if I get this wrong, Dave, I think he wanted some of it to sort of be a bit higher up the spectrum almost, because there's a lot of melody involved in the bass on the record. Between bass and drums, I mean, to some extent they kind of work themselves out. I probably would have keyed the things like the kick drum to the bass a little bit to help it punch through, but yeah, I mean, my initial answer with no is probably the most honest answer, really.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Not that it's something you shouldn't think about, or maybe I should think about that. And
yeah, I guess the only thing that I would elaborate on with the bass is that Dave and I have always kind of used the metaphor as like, if you take two jigsaw pieces and you slot them together, there's always a groove in one and the other, you know, and they sit together and they lock together, and that's how we've done the bass. It's like a bass and guitar. So for example, like you said, Dave has a lot of like 1.6k presence in his bass. So I take that out, or I would always suggest EQing that out of the guitar so that the bass can be heard at that point for certain, that growl that he has in the mid-range. Little things like that. So there was quite a bit of to and fro in the mix process. So Dave was quite specific on getting that to happen, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think some of that was kind of dialed in the first place, but then I think we probably focused in on it when we mixed as well. Yeah,
definitely. So the next part of his question, low budget guitar playing, says, how many guitar tracks are there at different points? Are any sections single tracked or quad tracked for heaviness?
Yeah, I mean, this is a thing that's I think fairly intuitive as you go through. So because with music like this, is sometimes I don't know how many guitar tracks in a song, but it's not that we've got all these guitar tracks playing at the same time. It's that a particular section will require a certain guitar sound, and we were multi-miking and multi-amping and things like that. So the track count got pretty ridiculous at times. But you kind of take it on a section-by-section basis with this kind of music, I think. So yes, there will be points where there might be 4 or even 5 guitars going on, but I think we sort of did it so they were looking after certain aspects. So I know some people would track a rhythm guitar, double track, sort of almost the same guitar sound either side, and there'll be points where we'd have done that, and some people talk about quadrupling them. I don't think we really did that, but there will be points where we did, say, record a main riff guitar each side, and then we might have had a single note drop octave version underneath that's just real subtle, just to give it a bit more girth. Yeah, and then you might have some atmospheric thing going on at the same time, so they're creating one big sound. And
yeah, I mean, in terms of heavy guitars, we always had Kraken, and then there was a KSR, and then there was a Kraken and a Diesel, and we always had those two. There was always a Kraken on either side blended with something else. And then in terms of cabs, it was like, I don't know, there was a Mesa cab in there was all sorts of stuff, V30s and old stuff, and then just a bunch of mics. And it was always a case of, I just remember it being like, any guitar sound we dialed in was just disgusting. Yeah. And it was always that thing where you want to keep adding to it because it sounded so good, but there was a point where, and that's what's great about having a producer, like especially like Mark, is that you just go, I think we've got enough. Like, I think that's filthy enough.
Yeah.
The same with reverb. Like, I love reverb and delay, so I'll always be cranking it up and going, yeah, it sounds so great. And then you'd go, it's probably too much.
Yeah.
We need to dial that back a bit.
What sounds great on its own doesn't always sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, things, especially reverb, can build up, and it's very hard to take away. You can always add more, but we did have all that kind of stuff going on, and I think you were teaching me as well about, especially, I think I shied away more from having reverb in big heavy tones.
Yeah.
I think you made me realise more how great that can be and how big that can sound.
Yeah. It's only through like a live thing, I suppose, that I use reverb a lot in my heavy sounds live, and I think in the studio it's just the only way I'd know how to recreate that on record is doing the same thing, starting in the same place and working out what works and what doesn't. But it was interesting because I've always engineered my own guitars and spent years now, at least 5 or 6 years now, just being into guitar engineering for whatever it is I'm doing, whether it's Andertons, myself, whatever. So I was really intrigued to see someone else that's recorded so many bands and records, how they do it. And it was this constant kind of, oh, is that what you're doing? And then you do the same, and then we just bounce back and forth with each other. And I think it worked out really well, actually. I was curious about the heavy tones because I remember saying to you, I don't want it to sound like modern prog metal kind of genty, quacky kind of MIDI guitar sound. I'm not into that. And I know that you don't listen to that kind of stuff first and foremost. But I still wanted it to sound crushing and heavy and percussive and articulate. So it was this weird grey area of tone. Yeah. I think we pulled it off though.
I think, the first day was basically spent setting up and just experimenting, wasn't it? Just finding the cab that went with the head. We got the main rhythm tone was always something we could go back to. So like you said, it was a Kraken and a Diesel one side and a Kraken and the Rev.
It was KSR.
Sorry, the other side.
We used Rev on Congress.
Yeah. And so we had a few sort of go-tos, but then everything had to be adjusted slightly for each track, and the two amps would be doing something slightly different, so you might favour the Diesel in one track and the Kraken in another and things like that. But it's really intuitive as you go along and you've got things set up. By the end of it, we were finding things really quickly, and it's all about context, and it kind of goes back to what you're saying about the crossover thing with the bass and guitar. There's points, well, if you go into any mix and pull out the bass, like the guitar on its own might sound odd or thin or something like that, and it's how those two glue together, and what people perceive as a huge guitar sound is a huge guitar and bass sound relationship kind of thing, isn't it? Like,
yeah, and I couldn't be happy with the tones. I think for anyone curious, it was a Diesel VH4, and the KSR it began with an O. KSR, I want to say Osiris, but it's not Osiris. That belonged to Nolly, and that had a mod in it, so it's not a stock one, but we used those two.
Yeah, channel 3 on the Diesel. It's the one. Yeah,
because people will ask, like what amps specifically were they? It was always the VX Krakens, and then it was those two.
And we used the Sheriff a lot as well.
We did for all the clean stuff, and
some of the overdubby, sort of more driven Marshall sort of sound to it, isn't it? Like,
there was a Fender twin reverb head. We even used that Bad Cat for cleans as well.
Yeah. Spoilt.
We were spoilt for choice.
Totally spoilt for choice. Yeah.
Next question is from Mark Roberts. He says, if we do a mix walkthrough sometime, what song would you guys be most interested in?
Said that without moving my lips.
You did. But yeah, seriously.
But yeah.
Like, comment down below, because what we'll probably do is Mark will do a video on his channel going through, I'll probably come over, or going through one of the tracks maybe.
Yeah, you could help jog my memory and stuff. And
yeah. So let us know in the comment section which song off the album you want us to break down. Cool. Captain Kills says, hey Mark, what are the main things you look out for when mixing, producing an album? And what would be a great way to start mixing and producing my own stuff in terms of post-production of songs?
Sorry, things I look out for when producing...
Yeah, mixing and producing an album.
Okay. Big question.
It's a big question.
Yeah. The main things to look out for, I suppose, is... Well, the main thing to have in mind when you start is some kind of end goal, like some kind of vision as to what it might be. And that in my opinion, belongs with the band. So your job as a producer, or if you're producing your own stuff, is the bigger picture kind of thing. Even if what you have in your head isn't what it turns out to be, you've equally got to let it become what it becomes. It's very rarely that you get to the end of a project and you're like, yep, that's exactly how I thought it would sound, and all that kind of thing. So I think you need some kind of end goal, long-term vision in there, and not get too caught up in the details and things like that. So that kind of be one thing, is just to make sure that you've got your eye on the prize, because otherwise the project can just roll on, and you can go off on tangents and start worrying about the ocarina when you should be worrying about the main vocal.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And then he says, what would be a great way to start mixing and producing my own stuff in terms of post-production of songs?
In terms of post-production, I don't know. I mean, the best way to get into doing your own stuff is just to, well, obviously you need to get yourself some kind of DAW and a microphone, and just start experimenting, really. There's different ways to learn. You can go and do courses. There's tons of stuff to learn online. I learned the kind of fairly long route, I think, through my own misgivings. A lot of it was trial and error. It's just, I do think to some extent you need to go and make the mistakes in terms of furthering yourself. You can, I don't know, I've got mixed feelings about that. I made a lot of mistakes and stuff, and I think it helped me, because a lot of your role as an engineer is problem solving. Like, more than anything else, you've got to be a problem solver, because most of your job is like, okay, this guitar doesn't sound right, how are we going to make it sound right? So the more you've kind of had to deal with that, the easier it is, and you just have an increasing box of tricks to sort of delve into, and like, why don't we try this thing that worked last time? I'm still not quite answering that question, am I?
No, you are. I think it's such a big question in terms of, well, if you're trying to give someone advice that's getting into it, and they're talking about, I guess to break it down to, like, if they're mixing something, so less recording, if they're doing in post, if you've got some drums, some bass, some guitar, and some vocal, I guess this is a video that probably good for your own channel, but it's that thing where it's like, what's a good starting point for each of those instruments in terms of, we talking you should EQ and compress, or should you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
I think the important thing is the balance. The main aspect of mixing, that I think it was a realization I came to, because you get really kind of, especially if you watch, and you've got to try all these ideas out, but especially if you watch lots of tutorials and things like that, you can get really kind of bogged down in, okay, how do I compress this thing and EQ that thing, and maybe start by just balancing your signals and try and get it so you can hear everything, and then if there's something that you feel is clashing, then pull out the EQ or the compressor or something, and just start simple, because most people listening to music, they don't care about your compressor or your EQ, they care about the song. And your initial mixes might not be the most pretty things in the world, but if you can convey the emotion of the song and the kind of the important aspect of it, is try and put your head into a space where you're the listener and you're not the engineer, and approach it from that angle. Maybe that's something to think about. But something really cool that's about now is all these kind of nail the mix things, where you can get tracks from professionally recorded tracks and have a play with them. Like, I definitely recommend trying that, because you'll get to hear perhaps how things should sound, because a lot of this stuff presumably is really well tracked, and play with that, but equally it's really important to do your own stuff and try and get your engineering chops down. But from a post-production mix standpoint, I reckon that's like a really good thing to try out. Get some stems and have a play.
There you go. Wise words indeed. I didn't know you were that wise.
I'm really not.
Next question is from John.
It's from John
Giyuka.
Hey John,
I don't know if I said your name right. I always apologize when I do these things, because it's really hard to know sometimes. But John Giyuka asks, do you rely on studio EQ or instrument/tone EQ to make instruments stand out in the mix, throughout the song's ebb and flow? Thanks.
I suppose so, yes. We try and get everything sounding right in the first place. Again, like, you reach for an EQ when you've got a problem, I think. Or not a problem, but, you know, try and get it right in the first place. If the guitar sound needs to be brighter, then brighten it on the amp, or even track through an EQ and try and get it right, because that decision is going to inform your next decision. So, yeah.
Cool. So now we've got a question from Job Lewis, who says, "Hey Mark and Rabea, were there any unique methods utilised to retain Toska's live sound on the album?"
Well, we had a lot of room mics going on. I don't know if that's unique, but it's something we definitely did.
Do we use those? I mean, so for example, on the guitars, there was a room mic in the room
all
for
the time.
cabs.
Yeah,
and that's in the mix all the time.
Yeah, and the bass. There was a stereo ribbon mic, the AEA R88, the long egg. That I think brought some continuity. It's going to be real subtle sort of stuff, but I find even with heavy guitars, if I haven't got a room mic or something, I do put like a short reverb or something on it, just to sort of, so that it's not right here, because if you've got a big roomy drum sound and then the guitar's here, it sometimes that sounds cool, but if you want it to like retain that live, a band in a room, a little bit of that, then it's good to have either some reverb or a room mic. But that same room mic in virtually the same position was there through the drum tracking, bass tracking and guitar tracking.
Yeah.
And yeah, just a little bit of that just gave it some life. And
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And again, just to reiterate, anyone watching at this point of the video, there is a making of the Toska record where we covered a lot of that stuff, and there's a lot of shots of the mics used and just generally where they were and stuff. So if you want to put Mark's answers into context, you can jump to that. Video will be in the description box. Next question's from Monsieur Absurd, and he says, "It was a breath of fresh air when I first listened to the album. Everything sounds real and natural." Thank you very much.
Thank you.
"So tired of the overlay processed drums and guitars lately. I really appreciated how natural everything sounded. Was this a conscious decision going into the mix, or did it just end up that way?"
I think it's pretty conscious, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
From everyone's perspective, those conversations were had. I couldn't do one of those really polished kind of metal records if I tried. I don't think. I just don't think that's the way I hear things, really.
So you'd say, so there's a good question, like, in itself. Your style, like, how would you define your style as a producer, mixing engineer?
I think your style kind of comes from your taste and how you hear things. Like, to me, you know, we're in an amazing drum room. Like, I try and capture how the drums sound when I'm stood in there listening to them, and put them on a record, and then try and get that to work with the guitars, and same with the guitars, you know. It's trying to get that. So I think we did want that. We didn't want it to sound like an atypical prog metal record. Those things are cool, but I don't think it would suit the band. I don't think it would be something that I'd excel at, and I don't think it was what anyone wanted, really, was it?
No, I think that's a good answer in itself, that you know your limitations as well as your strengths.
Yeah.
When you're working in a professional environment, like when a band comes to you for a service, it's knowing, yeah, I can totally work with that, or I'm not your guy. And so I think that's really important. So, which you do. You did work really well with us, which is great, because you're great. There you go. Simple. Right. Oh, there's so many questions. Thank you all for these questions. There are so many. Icetro Blade says, "Do you use speakers or headphones when you mix?"
Speakers.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Any reason why? I mean, I know why. I'm just, in case they don't, people that are watching don't know.
Yeah,
why.
I'll reference headphones if I've got some DT, they're DT 770s, the Bayer just tracking headphones that I'll reference for low end and stuff sometimes. But there's something about, for me, mixing on headphones that just doesn't. I've tried before. I've lived in places where I've not had a mix room for a bit and had to mix something on headphones, and I just find it tricky. There's people that can do it, and you can get nice reference, sort of open back reference headphones and stuff, which I do have a pair of the Sennheiser HD 650s, I think they're called, and they're good. But yeah, personally, I have to hear it on speakers to really know what I'm doing. What about you?
I'm the same. Like as you can see, I mix sat here, and it's like, what I will do is I'll bounce it out, put it on iTunes so it comes onto my phone. Then I'll run upstairs, play it through the lounge system, chuck it on my in-ears, and just have a listen to anywhere in the first sort of 15 minutes, and then I'll know how close I am to what I want. And then come back down and do it, change it, which is normally what I have to do. I'm not as good, so I have to come back and constantly mess around. As well. Okay, next question is from Piotr Siwicki. I'm sorry if I didn't say your name right again. He asks, do you use any compression on direct mics on the drums, or maybe only on the drum bus? Do you use parallel compression?
Yeah, often track with a bit of compression. I think we had the room mics compressed and hitting some of the close mics as well. I think I'm talking about this record in particular, we were using distressors on kick and snare. Had the room mics going through a stereo compressor, and we were sending like a sub mix, I think, of snare and kick and toms through. Pete at Middle Farm's got a pair of old Sony kind of, I'm not sure what they are, but it wasn't so much compression, just things that we were hitting just for some colour and stuff like that. And they were bought out, and time to time I'll be able to sort of show you this stuff when I go for a mix. But yes, basically try and get the drums sounding how you want. I'm probably a bit more conservative with how much I use, especially if I'm in a studio where I'm unfamiliar with the monitoring or something, because you don't want to get it home and have gone to, a bit like with the reverb, like you don't want to go super hard on the compression unless you're 100% sure. And then yes, I do use parallel compression when mixing drums.
For anyone that doesn't know what parallel compression is, it's essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's when you have almost an identical mix, or you select what you want of the drums into a separate channel, smash it, and then you blend it for power and for that beef.
Yeah. And you can do it with anything like vocals and stuff as well, because you can get some of the attributes from that super compressed signal, because you're bringing up your you're bringing down your dynamic range, so you've got that consistency underneath, and then you can just bring in as much as you need, so you're getting the best of both worlds to some extent. But with drums with anything, but particularly with drums, you've got the benefit of, you can just really slam, say, your close mics or something, and a little bit of overheads, and rather than, sometimes it can work to smash the whole drum mix and just parallel that, but sometimes it makes the cymbal sound a bit nasty or something, so you can focus in on the, because often you use it for punch, so you can focus in on like your close mics and stuff. Nice.
We've got a couple more questions. This is from Sonata, and he/she asks, they ask, I don't know. Because the tracks are instrumental, do you consciously manage the space where vocals typically fall, or just allow more room for guitars to breathe in the open?
I think you just allow more. It just allows more space for everything to breathe in the open, I think, because you haven't got that. Yeah, it's more that you just don't have to worry about trying to fit a vocal in.
What do you typically, because obviously you mix bands with vocalists, what are you typically taking away to fit those in? Cymbals, guitars, mids, high end?
I don't know. Yeah, there'll be little bits of, I don't know. I shy away from mentioning frequencies too much, because I think it can send people down a rabbit hole. I mean, there's a kind of low mid thing sometimes. If you pull a bit of 300 out of here and there, that can help the presence of a vocal. 3K's area, some of the clarity in the high mids and things. But if I'm mixing something, I very rarely would mix the backing track and then be like, okay, let's carve a space for vocal. Yeah, the vocal, even if I'm not monitoring it constantly, I'll be checking how is the vocal sitting here. And when you're tracking the band, you'll have tracked the vocal in context to the backing track anyway. So
nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Benjamin Gibson asks, just tell us everything.
Already said too much.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a good question. This is from Joel Mayhay. Sorry if I didn't say your name right. Joel Mahay. I'm going to say that's how you say it.
John Mahay.
He says, do you sample, replace / reinforce any drums? And how do you manage to keep the drums suitable for both heavy and clean parts? Would you automate, change, re-record anything? And as for the mix breakdown, I would love to hear when Genghis waits, because it has such a huge range of sounds and moods.
Yeah, I do use samples and stuff sometimes. More to sort of augment the sound, I suppose, like reinforce it. So on this record, we took some samples of Ben hitting the snare. There's a bit of snare, just ambience, that's being triggered and compressed a bit, just to make sure, more for the heavy sections. I think a lot of the verses, there's nothing particularly going on that. I don't think I've ever sample replaced anything, but yeah, sort of added to with things. In a room like that, you don't need to do that much.
Because there's a bit of ambiguity around that stuff, isn't there? With people seem to think it's cheating, or like that it's false, or like it's an easy route or something.
But I mean, I do have a bit of a gripe with that, because it's kind of like, but it's okay to add artificial reverb to something.
Yeah, touche.
And I think it's, in some ways, it's almost more, it's got more integrity in a way, because rather than adding a synthetic reverb, you're adding the room sound of the actual drum played in the actual room. And the reason for that being is you turn your room mics up to a certain point, and you're not kind of, it goes to what we're talking about, retaining the punch and stuff, I think, because you keep turning the room mics up and you're going to bring up a lot of cymbal energy and stuff like that. So when you just want to turn, it's that thought of, I wish I could just turn up the ambience of the snare on its own. Well, that's how I do that. And then you said about the presence and stuff.
Do you automate, change, re-record anything?
Yeah. There's a lot of automation involved. When I was giving you the stems for the playthrough the other day, there was one of the songs I had 2 completely different mixes of the drums for the verses and choruses, just because you just might need to do a bit more in a more dense, heavy section. So there might be just more close mics, more parallel compression, more of everything, just to help it smash through a load of guitars.
One thing, just to clear up, if you don't know what automation is, like when you used to see those old studio videos of like an engineer sat at a desk and he'd be going like this in certain sections of the song with the faders, that's what that is.
Yeah.
You're automating the volumes of different tracks to come up and down when you need them to, when you're working from a DAW, like Logic or Pro Tools.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think, because we've got so many questions, but this video will go on for hours, so I want to ask one question, and that will be the final question in this video. And it's a 2-part question. The first part is, what kind of content are we going to see on your YouTube channel? And the second question is, what was your favourite track on the Toska record to mix?
Okay, so the first question is about my channel, which you should definitely go and subscribe to.
Please do. It's very informative.
Well, it's getting more informative as we go. So what I'm doing on it is just trying to sort of share some information, really. First and foremost, that's probably it. I've done a few videos on how to kind of mic up a drum kit and things like that. I'm trying to start quite basic with it and work up and show some more techniques and things. Also, going to start sort of documenting some of the sessions I'm doing within reason, because it's difficult when you're on the clock and everything. I don't want bands to be like, it's more worried about making his little films, isn't he? So yeah, I'm going to share a bit of that, and I've already done a couple of like interviews and things with people where we're going to talk about studio stuff, but also just have a chat, and hopefully that stuff's going to be interesting to people. And I want to learn. I want to sort of, I think you always want to keep getting better at what you do. So it's also selfishly something that will just kick me up the arse to kind of pick other people's brains and analyse what I'm doing and hopefully get better at it, and people can tell me what I'm doing wrong in the comments section and all that sort of stuff.
Sounds good.
Favourite song to mix on the record? My favourite mix on the record is Genghis, I think.
Genghis. Yeah, that's probably one of my favourites too.
Yeah.
I remember us battling with that for a little bit, and there was that one session where we went, this is sounding really good now.
Yeah.
It suddenly just like went, chink.
Yeah. There's that moment where you're kind of nearly there, and then things will just kind of come together, and you know it when you're adjusting things by like 0.5 of a decibel.
Yeah.
It seems like the adjustments get smaller and smaller as you get towards the end of a mix, but I'm a perfectionist, and I think most people are, aren't they, that do this kind of thing. And when we had a like listening back to the record when it was all done, and I'm not going to lie, you know, it's hard to listen back to something, especially when you've heard it so many times, without going, oh, I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd have got that bit better. And that was one I was listening to, and I was like, yeah, man, that's pretty. That had the least amount of cringe value for me. But I'm really happy with the whole thing overall. But I'm never going to be like, because I'll give up then, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
No, I've done it. I'm going to give up.
Fair play.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. And again, if you've got more questions to do with this entire thing, put them in the comments section, and then Mark, you could do a follow-up video and some mix breakdowns on your channel. Yeah. As I said, let us know what songs to have a look through, and if that's cool with you guys. Absolutely. We can have a look through it, and yeah. This won't be the last time we see Mark on this channel. And welcome him to YouTube, everybody. Thanks for the warm welcome. Cool, man. Like, subscribe, share, comment, and subscribe to Mark. I'll put a link somewhere in here to subscribe to him. But we will see you all very soon.